Our reactions to WWE Evolution. Our reactions to WWE Crown Jewel. Ronda Rousey, the best women's wrestler. Shoot our work on the wrestling rumors this week. And swerve me wrong. Evolution was not the best pay-per-view by WWE this year. My name is Michael Valenti. This is Ralph Valenti. And you're listening to the Squared Circle Psychobabble. Well, I thought this was going to be a very positive episode because I really tried to make this all about the women's wrestling. And with what happened at Evolution, I thought we were going to have that. It was a great show. Is it the best show? We'll debate that later on in the show. But then that show, Friday night, in that place they wouldn't mention for the last 2 weeks, happened. And they did everything they could to piss the wrestling fans off.
Yes. The internet wrestling community is probably very pissed off at what transpired yesterday.
What do you think is the one thing, though, that pissed people off the most? Is it the fact that Lesnar is Universal Champion again?
Has to be. Has to be that Brock Lesnar is the Universal Champion, only because there were so many people that were against it with his previous run. But we always talk about this. WWE at the end of the day is a business, and they're going to do what they feel is best for business. Braun Strowman at some point in his career is going to be the Universal Champion. But having him just turn face, oddly enough, you know, it wasn't necessarily planned that way, right? Unfortunately, we know Roman Reigns is going to be out battling leukemia. So they had to change things up, and they needed to do Braun versus Brock, and they needed a face, and that just so happened.
Honestly, though, I think it's the best move as well, because eventually Braun is going to be Universal Champion. It's inevitable. Yeah. Do you want his first title win to be at such a controversial show like Crown Jewel, where people are hashtagging boycott Crown Jewel, cancel WWE Network? You have Hulk Hogan coming back, so you have backlash for that. The fact that there's no women on the card, you got backlash for that. Yeah. Then you have Brock Lesnar winning the Universal title. He's already a bad guy, so put the heat on him anyway. But I think the one thing that really pissed people off the most was the World Cup finals. And the person that wins and is now named the best in the world is Shane McMahon. Right.
This is one of the moments where it literally was a facepalm. Like I was really hopeful they were going to do something with this whole World Cup, best in the world thing, and something would come out of it. And what are you going to do with Shane McMahon? Hopefully this doesn't turn into something. I don't know. I don't get it.
There's one reason why Shane McMahon winning the World Cup tournament makes sense. He's going to become this generation's Mr. McMahon. He's going to be the heel authority figure on SmackDown, use this World Cup to his advantage and use his power to have things go his way. The only problem is, with the story that they told at Crown Jewel, everybody involved is a heel. Baron Corbin, the heel GM on Raw. Dolph Ziggler's a heel who Shane McMahon beat in the finals. The Miz, who got hurt and Shane McMahon replaced. He's probably your best heel. And now because of this, if they go through this story, you're going to have to make The Miz a babyface.
Yeah, and that's the thing that struck me. The Miz is, if they turn him face, does he now feud against Shane McMahon and do something where he says, "Oh, you stole my moment, you stole the spotlight from me," egotistical, something like that? I mean, I think we can all agree that The Miz is better suited as a heel just because of his ability to cut a good promo, and it fits his personality perfectly. I think he's more than capable of being a face and having a good run, but
he's definitely more marketable than he was the last time they tried making him a baby face.
Right.
When he was doing that whole thing with Ric Flair, it just didn't click.
No,
this time,
not at all.
He's got Miz and Mrs.
Yep.
People still cheer him because of the things that he says in his promos, whether you think that's a good heel or not. I mean, did you hear JBL earlier this week? He was on Busted Open Radio.
I didn't hear this.
Okay, so he was on Busted Open Radio this week, which is Bubba Ray Dudley's radio show on Sirius XM. And they asked him about the heels. And basically he's saying that if people are telling you you're a good heel and you're selling shirts and people are cheering you, you are doing a terrible job at being a heel. So maybe I think while they still boo some of the promos that he says, people are cheering him too much that maybe the babyface turn is now the right move.
Right.
The other thing too is they were telling this story and it looked like the path that they were going was that the Miz was going to win the WWE Championship. Daniel Bryan maybe wins the Royal Rumble and they have a match at WrestleMania. I think now that gets derailed. Maybe because of Daniel Bryan refusing. Now there's rumors saying they have nothing for Daniel Bryan because of this, that he submitted in a great match on SmackDown against AJ Styles, that now this will start the burial for Daniel Bryan.
Yeah, I don't put too much stock in that. Daniel Bryan is too big of a name for them to bury just because he refused to go to Saudi Arabia. And, I just don't see them doing that from a business standpoint, especially given that he is such a big name and marketable and a big draw and a great wrestler. So at the end of the day, are some of the higher ups in WWE upset that he didn't make the trip? Probably, because they had to shift things around. But I don't think they'd actually go out of their way intentionally to bury him because he didn't go.
This is WWE. They do petty things like this.
Yeah,
John Cena, he's already on his way out. So, you could just write him off, never come back, whatever. But Daniel Bryan is probably your top babyface outside of AJ Styles on SmackDown.
Yeah.
And now,
I get it.
By refusing to go to this show that is bringing in a lot of money to the company, it is controversial. I understand it. But if you're supposed to be a company guy,
yeah,
you've heard Mark Henry say it. You've heard Randy Orton say it. And even Ronda Rousey said it. They should be going. Yeah. And at the end of the day, Vince is signing his paycheck. You may disagree with why you're there. You may disagree with the politics in Saudi Arabia, but you could make change. Renee Young commentated.
I was actually very surprised she actually made the trip. Now, Granted, we didn't see any female wrestlers.
But this is the step towards that.
Who knows? Maybe someday that will be, and that'll be a great moment, not only in wrestling history, but in history in general. So, going back to what you were saying about, working for the company and you're getting paid by Vince McMahon, Randy Orton put it perfectly. Somebody was interviewing him, I think it was TMZ, and he said, "Look, man, I got 5 kids at home.
Exactly. Why do
if they want me to be in Saudi Arabia, I'm going to be in Saudi Arabia."
Kurt Angle, same thing. He has 5 kids. He has a wife. Right. Rey Mysterio has kids. The Miz has a kid. They have to put food on the table. If they refuse, they don't get that paycheck. Yeah. So, yes, money talks at the end of the day. And while there's many people boycotting this show and trashing it at the end of the day, I will say this, though. Going back to Brock Lesnar versus Braun Strowman, I haven't used this term in quite a few weeks, but I need to address the mouth-breathing basement dwellers. I went on Twitter, and I was live tweeting throughout the show, and I could not believe the amount of people that were saying Braun Strowman was buried in this match.
They deliberately went out of their way to protect him.
Exactly. They protected Braun Strowman, if anything. He survived, kicked out of 4 F5s, including one where he was thrown out of the ring. Before the bell even rings, Baron Corbin hits Braun Strowman with the belt. Right. How is this a burial?
I didn't see it that way.
You know what? You want to know an example of a burial? Jinder Mahal is a burial. Last year, he was WWE champion at this time. Now he's not even...
hardly relevant.
He's barely on TV. And when he is, he's always taking the pin. He's losing almost every match with Alicia Fox on Mixed Match Challenge. That's a burial. Kicking out of 4 or 5 F5s and getting hit with a belt, that's not a burial. That's protection. Did you say the same thing at WrestleMania 34? Oh, Braun Strowman's getting buried because of all these F5s that he's kicking out of. No, you complained because they protected Roman. Yeah. How is this different?
It's not different.
It's not. Go keep drinking your Mountain Dews. buy a couple more t-shirts of your favorite wrestlers and ask mom for more meatloaf, because you really need to look at the sun and be outside for a while and understand what burial means in professional wrestling. But I digress.
What did you think of the match?
The Braun match?
The Braun match.
It wasn't a terrible match. I mean, for it only being, 3 minutes and 20 seconds, it was entertaining.
Yep.
Did I like that Braun didn't win? No, but I understood it. And I think one thing that WWE has done well in the last 18 to 24 months is protect Braun Strowman. He has not looked bad at all in the last 2 years. So the fact that you're saying that they're buried, I even saw on Twitter, someone videotaped themselves MFing WWE and saying, "Why did you bury Braun Strowman?" And like went on for like a minute and a half.
Huge rant.
I'm like, this isn't a burial, guys.
Yeah.
This is not a burial.
Well, here's
Get
how
out of your basement.
I understand it from a business standpoint, and I also think putting the belt back on Brock is important for two reasons. One, we know that he's going to be having a matchup against AJ Styles. We already know what they're capable of because we've seen it.
Yes.
Two, eventually when he does drop the belt, if it's to Strowman or if it's to somebody else, they get the rub from that.
What do you think about
Lesnar's
this?
a big name.
What do you think about this? If it's not Braun Strowman, what if they do Drew McIntyre turns on Dolph?
Yeah.
And he is the one that takes the belt from Brock Lesnar.
Yeah. It's got to be somebody. And with Roman out, he's automatically eliminated. It's going to probably be Strowman, maybe Drew McIntyre as a long shot. It could be Seth Rollins. I mean, whoever ends up being, they're going to get a rub
Seth,
from that.
especially with him having the IC title.
Well,
his feud with Ambrose.
It depends how long Lesnar holds the belt, how much he's actually going to be able to compete if he does go over to the UFC. The point I wanted to make about this match was this. So I've been pretty vocal about the WWE delivering in the ring and how a lot of Brock Lesnar's matches have been repetitive. They're all very similar, suplex, F5, and I don't have a problem with that so long as the fans go home happy. When you watch something like a real fight, like UFC, the heavyweight fights traditionally they don't go past the first couple of rounds. There's very few times where it goes the distance, the 3 or 5 rounds.
Right.
We also know that, nowadays people's attention span is lesser. People shorter and simpler is better in a lot of cases. So I get it. I understand it. Sometimes I get frustrated because I want to see a longer drawn out match that's, well wrestled, but these are heavyweights. So maybe WWE is looking at the UFC, which is real, and saying, okay, well, we don't have to put on these 5-star matches for the heavyweights. And, especially with somebody like Brock Lesnar, maybe eventually down the road, he has, like with AJ, I expect like a 15, 20-minute match, but you're not going to get that with him versus Strowman, or even you saw that when he wrestled Goldberg. So it was what it was. I understood it. I have no problem with Brock being champion again. One, as a fan, because I like Brock Lesnar. And two, because I know whoever takes that belt off him, we know it's not going to be Roman, unfortunately, because he's out. But whoever ends up taking the belt off Brock, it'll mean something because you're taking it off a credible champion.
I can see that. And it's definitely Braun or Drew. That, I think, is obviously the answer. It's just a matter of who Vince likes more and wants to pull the plug on first.
Yep. AJ or Brock, who you got?
I think AJ's going to win.
Yep.
Brock won last year. This is a rematch of Survivor Series 2017, so I definitely see AJ winning this one, especially because if you believe some of the fans that go on social media and Reddit and Twitter, they want AJ to surpass CM Punk.
Mm-hmm.
Folks, it's not happening.
Well,
AJ Styles is probably going to drop the title before WrestleMania. I'm going to call it now. Well, I definitely thought it was going to happen with this Miz Daniel Bryan storyline, but it seems like that's not going to happen. There's no real heel now to face AJ Styles if you turn the Miz baby face, unless Shane McMahon, like I said before, is going to become the new Mr. McMahon and we see a corporation.
Maybe. We'll see. It's interesting. I'm going to make two predictions. One, AJ beats Brock.
Mm-hmm.
And two, this will be AJ Styles' best match in the WWE. If they give them time.
Well, they're definitely going to give him time.
Yeah.
There's really no
you
matches.
Never know. You never
There's
know.
no matches on the card other than you're going to get a Raw versus SmackDown Survivor Series match. You know that's going to happen.
Yeah.
You know you're going to get Becky versus Ronda, which is going to be an awesome match. But again, WWE has booked themselves into a corner. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. You have Seth versus Nakamura, which should be a good match. I see Seth easily winning that one, no problem.
That could seal the show. That's going to be a good match, I think.
And also, you would think the Raw tag team. Well, no, the Raw tag team titles can't face the SmackDown tag titles because Seth is already in a match, unless he has 2 matches in one night.
Unless they drop the belts,
or they drop the belts.
A revival, maybe.
AOP.
They could get some love.
AOP.
Oh, yeah, I can see that too. They're getting a pretty halfway decent push right now.
They're the only tag team really getting a push because you
really
have the Revival losing to Lucha House Party this past Raw.
I don't understand that. I really don't get it.
But anyway, let's move on to the positives of WWE this past week. WWE Evolution, the first ever women's pay-per-view in WWE history. And it was a good show.
Very good
show. A
show.
lot of people are calling it the best show of 2018 so far by WWE. That's our Swerve Me Wrong segment coming up later on the show, so you don't want to miss that. But I really want to dive into Becky Lynch versus Charlotte, a match really everybody's calling a great match, maybe the match of the year in WWE. In fact, Dave Meltzer gave it 4 3/4 stars, the highest rated women's WWE match in history for Meltzer. Is it worth the 4 3/4 or should it have gotten the 5?
Was it a 5-star match? Well,
I think
at that point you might as well call it a 5-star match. And
I think the only reason it didn't is Mike Chioda clearly kicking the chair to Becky and holding Becky during the powerbomb spot. I don't know if you saw those spots. I definitely saw the chair. I had to see on social media a couple days later that he was holding Becky. I didn't see that in the initial show.
It is what it is. I mean, those minor things, there's going to be stuff in every single match, I'm sure, that you can point out. But in terms of the quality of the match, I mean, this was by far the best match on the card. And we'll talk a little bit about Evolution as a whole a little later on. But 4.75 versus 5 stars. I mean, at that point, who really cares? I know this was an awesome match.
Yeah.
A lot of cool spots. At no point did I ever say, "Man, this is bad. This is long." You could tell. Yeah, no.
It almost went a half hour. It went Triple H length.
Yeah, no, it was great. I mean, they put it all on the line. Kudos to Charlotte Flair for some of the bumps she took.
How many tables did she go through?
Tables, chairs.
3, 4?
They stole the spot where she was buried under all of the chairs,
right,
and
the Gargano spot.
Yeah, but regardless, I mean, it was a great match. Becky Lynch, to me, it has to be one of the most improved individuals on the roster.
Definitely. Definitely. In fact, I want to talk about this too. So Ronda Rousey has been named the top women's wrestler of 2018 by PWI, Pro Wrestling Illustrated. And we actually tweeted something congratulating Ronda Rousey, and we were retweeted by Pro Wrestling Illustrated, which was pretty cool. Right. And of course, we got some praise and backlash for this tweet. You have people retweeting it, liking it for agreeing that Ronda Rousey was the best wrestler from October 1st, 2017 to September 30th, 2018. But of course, you got the people that reply back saying, where's Alexa Bliss? Where's Becky Lynch? Where's, they named some Japanese wrestlers as well, like Io Shirai. Where's Tessa Blanchard? They all made the list. They all made the top 15. The top 3 were Charlotte Flair was number 3, Alexa Bliss was number 2, Ronda Rousey was number 1. Did you happen to see the tweet that Becky posted when the list came out?
I didn't.
Okay, so Becky Lynch was listed at number 11 on this list. So, of course, this whole the man thing that she's doing now, which I love it. Yeah. It's amazing. She tweets, the only way I'm described as 11 is if on a scale to 1 to 10, how hot I am right now, I'm 11. Yep. It was an awesome tweet. And this is how it should be in wrestling. use your social media to your advantage. And Becky gets it. Becky understands, and I love it. But unfortunately, for the time span that PWI used for this list, she was not this strong. It was only until SummerSlam where she became this. But I love this. I love that Ronda and Becky are facing off at Survivor Series. I'm just worried that someone is going to eat the pin clean or get submitted clean, and it's going to look bad. I'm not going to use the Barry term,
Right.
But it obviously will take some heat down for them.
So, yeah, I mean, you kind of alluded to this earlier. Ronda versus Becky, they kind of put themselves in a tough spot from a booking standpoint. You know, I do want to see this match. I don't know if I want to see it right now. I'd like to see I like to see a slow build towards matches, which WWE hasn't done that in quite some time. They usually will just kind of right out of the gate throw something together, rush it to fruition.
Because plans are always changing, it seems like.
Yeah, no, I understand that. One of the recent storylines that we've always talked about is the Miz and Daniel Bryan storyline, which it was good. I think it could have been done a little bit better. With Becky Lynch, I mean, what I would have liked to seen WWE do is, and I told you this, have her come out continuously on SmackDown, talk about how she should be considered the top women's wrestler, call out Ronda Rousey continuously. Ronda doesn't show up on SmackDown. Then eventually, right before WrestleMania, a couple weeks out, Ronda actually shows up. They're face to face. That way, you know, you let it, there's a slow build towards it. Mm-hmm. But, you know, either way, I think this is going to be a good match. I'm interested in it. I'm sure you've seen the video where Ronda's having her interview done and then Becky shows up.
Oh, champ.
What's up, champ?
Champ. Like, Charlie Caruso, can you do anything there? Like, just set a boom mic over the two and just get out of the shot.
But either way, I mean, it really, Ronda is, even if she's not going to be considered to some people the best women's wrestler right now, she's a huge name with a huge following, and she's done a great job in her time in WWE. Becky Lynch is probably, not just for women, but in all of WWE, she might be the hottest individual in all of wrestling right now as far as WWE is considered. So to bring these two entities together and have them face off, the crowd's going to be into this. It's going to be fun. It's going to make for a cool moment. So why not?
With the card that is there right now, we have Brock versus AJ. Mm-hmm. We have Shinsuke versus Seth. We have Ronda versus Becky. And you know there's going to be a Raw versus SmackDown match. Which one main events?
It's probably, well,
you would think that Brock versus AJ would main event.
You'd think so.
But let us not forget, AJ Styles doesn't main event pay-per-views. It's like against the law. Do you go with Ronda versus Becky?
Well, I guarantee you that'll get brought up at some point by Paul Heyman in a promo. He's probably going to say this will be your, you know, if that's going to be the main event, he'll probably exploit that and say, you know, you're going to be in the ring with Brock Lesnar. This will be your first opportunity to actually main event. All the bright lights will be on you. This is your moment, whatever. All the pressure is going to be on AJ. That being said, I could very easily see Ronda and Becky closing the show that night, and I wouldn't have a single problem with it.
With those two matches, I couldn't care less which one main events. I would personally like to see Ronda and Becky main event. I think that is the one that's going to sell more tickets right now. I think regardless of what kind of fan you are with WWE right now, a casual fan, a diehard fan, you can get behind one of those two. AJ is the fan favorite right now, one of the most popular wrestlers with wrestling fans right now. But then you have Brock Lesnar that people just hate right now just because they think because of who he is. Yep. That he just shows up when he wants. He's the Universal Champion, so we'll never see the belt again.
That's what makes moments like this special. The fact that there's so much legitimate hate for a guy like Brock Lesnar who just shows up, has these short matches. Now you've got a legitimate top guy like AJ Styles who's going to go in there. They're probably going to have a great match. As long as they're given the time, they're going to have a great match. We've seen it before. When you have a guy like AJ Styles who can literally, Brock can just do his whole routine, suplex, F5, whatever, allow AJ to wrestle around him, and it's going to be a good match.
Right.
But you need a guy like Brock Lesnar to complement AJ Styles and vice versa. You know, that's what makes moments like this special.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a guy like Brock Lesnar being the big heel who's just got this limited moveset who everybody hates. Everybody's going to be behind AJ Styles that night. A good majority of the crowd, I guarantee, will be behind him. And they're going to want to see Brock Lesnar lose.
Yep.
You know what that means? People are going to be invested in it. That means it's going to be a good moment. That's why you need a guy like Brock Lesnar. People don't want to be sitting on their hands. They want to cheer. That's why you go to shows.
Right. I agree. I mean, for all intents and purposes, that would be a good reason why it should be main event. But what if you make Becky versus Ronda a submission match? Armbar versus disarmor.
Yep. That'd be interesting.
The only problem with that is someone would have to obviously submit. But you do have Charlotte Flair in the background. You do have Nia Jax, who has a title shot. I don't think she gets involved in this. I think maybe she's part of the Team Raw Women's Survivor Series and just squashes everybody. So build her up better. But I would love to see this as a submission match. Charlotte Flair has to interfere, though, to protect whoever ends up losing. Do you have Becky win with Charlotte's help to set up 4 horsewomen versus 4 horsewomen? That's appetizing.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible.
You already have the other 3 forming an alliance at Evolution.
Yep, you sure did. Yep.
But the problem is they're all heels. Ronda is the top babyface on Raw. I mean, not like it matters. The story's there that they're the 4 horsewomen, and you have the 4 horsewomen of WWE. Royal Rumble. Or at least tease it at Royal Rumble. And maybe that's what we see at WrestleMania.
Yeah. I'd rather see Charlotte versus Ronda. Well, at this point, I'd rather see Ronda and Becky at WrestleMania, but we know we're getting that now. Charlotte versus Ronda at WrestleMania, or even if they build Asuka back up, I'd want to see that too. But I'd be all for the 4 horsewomen versus 4 horsewomen as well.
And they say WWE can't book long term.
Just give the only thing I'm asking for this pay-per-view, the matches on paper look great. Give the matches some time. The 4 big matches that we've been talking about, give those matches time. Let them go out there and have a good show. Limit the dusty finish.
Yes, definitely limit the dusty finish. I think we're about 30 minutes into this episode of the Squared Circle Psycho Battle, which probably is the longest first segment that we ever had. So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, it's Shoot or Work on the weekly wrestling rumors. You're listening to the Squared Circle Psycho Babble. Are you following the Squared Circle Psycho Babble on social media? If not, you better get onto it. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at SCPB Podcast. After a fun first segment on the Squared Circle Psycho Babble, it's time now for Shoot or Work, where we take the weekly wrestling rumors, say shoot if they're going to happen, work if they're not. So we'll start with Brock Lesnar. We talked about him in our last segment as he won the Universal Championship from vacant at Crown Jewel against Braun Strowman. Now, obviously, his contract always comes up when he shows up on TV. And we do have an update on Brock Lesnar's contract status. He has 2 dates left on his contract, according to Dave Meltzer. One is obviously Survivor Series. The other one has not been mentioned yet. So it could be TLC. It could be the Raw after. It could be Royal Rumble. It could be WrestleMania. We don't know. But if it is Royal Rumble, the next time we see Brock Lesnar defend the Universal Championship, that is the night after UFC 233, which is the first time he could be eligible to fight in UFC. If he's the Universal Champion, he could bring the title to UFC. So, Ralph, shoot or work, Brock Lesnar will bring the Universal Championship to UFC.
I'm sure it would be a cool moment, but I think it's a work. I don't see Brock Lesnar bringing a WWE Championship to the ring in the UFC, because I just think it opens himself up for a lot of ridicule from from a fan perspective, a lot of the diehard MMA fans who don't watch WWE or wrestling in general.
Will he still be champion though?
Will he still be champion? By that point, I don't know. If he's only got 2 working dates left on his contract and he's only obligated to, appear at those 2, I got to believe that he's got to drop the belt at some point and to somebody before then. So I just don't know who yet. I mean, do they do a thing with AJ and say it's belt versus belt and AJ
and unify it?
Maybe I don't know, or maybe they have a rematch on Raw with Strowman, and Kurt Angle comes back and makes a match. I don't know, because they're gonna need somebody to defend the belt. So if Brock's not around, if he's only got 2 dates,
well, if Baron Corbin interfered in that match at Crown Jewel, you would think that would lead to a storyline temporarily between Strowman and Corbin, where Strowman could just power slam him like he did Kevin Owens and just throw him in porta potties and make his life a living hell for 2 months until Royal Rumble. And then he takes the belt from Brock Lesnar. I'm not sure. I know Royal Rumble is in Phoenix. Do you know off the top of your head where UFC 233 is?
I don't off the top of my head.
I think it's on the West Coast. I think it's Los Angeles or Las Vegas.
Well, most of their fights are in Vegas, but
do I have it here? Does it have it listed in this news article?
You see, the one time we don't have Frank here,
our PA Frank is not here. It's actually
he's taking a bit of a sabbatical, so to speak.
His substitute today is Ralph's 5-year-old daughter, Ava. So
well,
she doesn't really do well with computers yet.
I'll say this. So we still don't know if Brock Lesnar is legitimately going to fight in the UFC. It's not on paper. DC is fighting tonight, and he's fighting against a guy who he can likely lose to. I mean, the guy that he's fighting stylistically doesn't match up well, but he's got a lot of punching power. So if he hits DC and knocks him out, that screws everything up,
right?
So the money fight for the UFC is going to be Brock Lesnar versus DC, but that match hasn't been announced yet. But DC's also going to this fight with a hand injury. So, I mean, does he do more damage to his hand? Does that mean more time off? Does he have to get surgery?
You could still do the fight between the two. It just wouldn't be for a title.
Sure, but I mean the title is a big part of that. I mean,
I agree. Yes,
people would still pay to see the fight if you did Brock versus. But the problem is, if DC loses tonight and he loses the belt, one, it's not going to be for a belt. It'll just be Brock Lesnar versus DC. But it also loses a little bit of steam if DC's coming off a loss and now he's facing Brock Lesnar. You want to see, ideally, you'd want to see Brock Lesnar fight for the belt against DC, who's still riding a winning streak.
Right. Well, I think Brock Lesnar, if he is going to fight again in UFC, it will be that night before Royal Rumble. And if that's the case, I think Vince sees a huge marketing opportunity to have Brock Lesnar there with the Universal title. So for now, I'm going to say shoot.
Vince and Dana White also have a pretty good professional relationship, from what I understand.
Right. It just, if Vince McMahon would just have a working relationship like he does with Dana White, that he should have with other promotions in wrestling, we could be seeing a much better product on TV. But speaking of the product on TV and other promotions that WWE compete with, New Japan Pro Wrestling has been talked about a lot with some of their top stars and their contracts running up. We're talking about Omega, Cody, the Young Bucks, Hangman, the Elite. But New Japan Pro Wrestling, according to Dave Meltzer, have offered big money contracts to top stars in WWE. Some of the names that have been thrown around are AJ Styles, whose contract ends at the end of the year, Shinsuke Nakamura, Seth Rollins, and Randy Orton. Now, I don't think AJ and Shinsuke are going back to New Japan Pro Wrestling, but Seth and Randy are very interesting names. So shoot or work, Seth Rollins and Randy Orton will sign New Japan Pro Wrestling contracts for 2019.
I'm going to say it's a work. The reason I'm going to say it's a work is, while New Japan Pro Wrestling still has been able to compete somewhat with the WWE, it's still not at the level that WWE is at.
I agree. But if they're offering what WWE pays some of these guys the same amount with less dates, you're talking Scott Hall all over again.
Yeah, but I just don't see it happen.
As much as they want to stay in WWE, and
Right.
even,
No,
and
I understand it.
Randy Orton even said this week, I got 5 kids.
Yep.
I got to go where the money is. Even if that means going to a politically backwards Saudi Arabia.
Yep.
So I could see it, him going to New Japan Pro Wrestling from a money perspective. For his style and what he wants to do right now in his career, that would be a very dumb move. So I'm going to say work as well. I do not. Seth Rollins is like Mr. WWE. He grew up a WWE fan.
That's the point I'm trying to make. WWE is still where you want to be. We both say work on this.
Both work on this. All right, so let's move on to the women's division. And so we didn't get the announcement of the women tag team titles at Evolution like everybody thought was going to happen. But the women's tag team titles are still a possibility. So there's a sign that apparently WWE executives are handing out to fans at live shows. And it just says, we want women's tag team championships. So obviously this would be a way for Stephanie McMahon to say, we're listening to our audience and give them what they want. That we will see a women's tag team championship on WWE programming. So shoot or work, women's tag team titles, still a possibility.
I'm going to say shoot. I mean, why not? I mean, we've seen it more and more now that the women are going out there and competing, and not only are they competing, but they're having good, legitimate wrestling matches. And now they've had their own pay-per-view, which was well received. The only downside to that, obviously, is it's more titles, so that means more writing and more of an investment that you have to make in certain characters. But
do you have it cross-brand though?
Cross-brand?
I think if this is going to work, you have to make it cross-brand.
Yeah, because there's just not enough time on the show. I mean, there's a lot of wrestlers and there's a limited amount of time.
And they have a lot of women tag teams right now that they're writing together.
Yeah, Asuka.
You have Asuka and Naomi. Yep. You have the Iconics. You have Sasha and Banks. You have
Sasha and Bailey.
Maybe Nia Jax and Tamina might be something soon. Yep. They have so much, and I'm sure there's some NXT call-ups that they could put together. You have the two other members of the Four Horsewomen, Shafir and Jessamine Duke. So that could be a tag team. Obviously, they're still new to NXT, so you won't see them for a while. But I could definitely see this. What I would love for WWE to do, though, between now and when they go to Fox for SmackDown, they got to put all the women on one show. And I would like them to be on Raw. Raw needs something for that third hour. And I think the women could have enough storylines, especially if you have a women's tag team division and you unify the women championships, have them all on Raw. And you could fill an hour with just them. You could. I would love to see it. So I'm going to say shoot. The women's tag team division and tag team titles are still a possibility. And we might see it at WrestleMania because our last rumor of the night has to do with two people that returned this week in WWE, Trish Stratus and Lita. Now, we saw them open the show at Evolution. They look pretty good for the time off that they had. Had a decent match with Alicia Fox and Mickie James for what it's worth. And for now, they're going to be off TV, but there's talks about them coming back in 2019. In fact, they might be around till WrestleMania 35 and have a big match for WrestleMania 35. Shoot or work, Trish and Lita, we see them in a match at WrestleMania 35.
I'm going to say shoot. Why not? You know, WrestleMania, WWE has notoriously brought in back older talent to be featured at WrestleMania. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, we've seen them do it with The Rock, and Hogan's been back, and all these other guys in between. So Trish and Lita, they looked pretty decent in their match. It wasn't the best, but it was still good. So as long as they could still compete, they're still a draw. The fans are into it. Sure, why not?
I agree. This is definitely a shoot. I'm going to one-up this. I'm going to combine two shoot or works this week. I'm going to say that Trish and Lita are going to be the ones in the women's tag team title match at WrestleMania, in the inaugural match to decide who are the women tag team champions. I don't think they're going to win it, and whoever does will be those champions. Do you make it Sasha and Bayley? Do you make it Alexa Bliss and Mickie James, the match that we should have had at Evolution? Mickie James has already beaten Trish Stratus once at WrestleMania. I don't understand why they never brought that up in this storyline. Not once. And Mickie James retired Lita, if I'm not mistaken. Why was that not brought up? I don't understand, but I would love to see Trish and Lita one more time. I think they still have something. Trish looks really good, to be honest with you. So I'm going to say shoot as well. And it will be for the women's tag team championships. So that is our shoot or work segment here this week on the Squared Circle Psychobabble. When we come back, it's Swerve Me Wrong, where I have 10 minutes to argue that WWE Evolution was not WWE's best pay-per-view of 2018. This is the Squared Circle Psychobabble. Are you following the Squared Circle Psychobabble on social media? If not, you better get onto it. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at SCPB Podcast. So we got about 10 minutes left on the Squared Circle Psychobabble, so it's time for Swerve Me Wrong. I have 10 minutes to convince Ralph here of the popular opinion that Evolution is not the best WWE pay-per-view of 2018. So we have 10 minutes on the clock. It starts now. So it was a great pay-per-view. No doubt about it. We had some iconic matches. In fact, Dave Meltzer, we already talked about it, said that Becky versus Charlotte was the best match, women's match, I should say, in WWE history, giving it 4 3/4 stars. But if you look at this card and compare it to SummerSlam 2018, I think SummerSlam 2018 still has the better show. Yes, it was 5 hours long, but to me, that 5 hours was really not that, it didn't feel like 5 hours like the typical pay-per-view of WWE has this year. Like it felt long. SummerSlam didn't do that for me. And you could take the battle royal that happened at Evolution, take it out. I thought it was a train wreck. I liked the ending. As the match progressed, it got better. But it was such a train wreck in the beginning. I'd rather see the 3 squash matches that we got at SummerSlam over that Battle Royal. And you had some other great matches. You had AJ versus Samoa Joe. Yes, the finish was kind of bad, but still a good match nonetheless. I still liked Roman versus Brock, the main event. I know we talked about that in a Swerve Me Wrong before. I liked that main event. The triple threat match for the women's championship on SmackDown was probably Carmella's best match since she's been on the main roster. And Seth Rollins versus Dolph Ziggler for the Intercontinental Championship was a great way to start the show. So while Evolution was still a great show, it was not the best show of 2018. SummerSlam was.
So I disagree. I think Evolution was a great pay-per-view, not just by, traditional women wrestling standards, which previously we know that, women's wrestling for what it was back then, it was really just kind of, it was there. They had a bunch of beautiful women in the matches. For the guys, pretty unfortunately, just to look at, it was eye candy. Right. Now they're
Bra
giving the
panties matches.
Yeah, stuff like that. I mean, now they're given the opportunity to actually go out there and legitimately compete, and they surpassed all expectations. And I do think this was a great pay-per-view, not just by women's wrestling standards, but in all of wrestling standards. I do believe that this was the best WWE pay-per-view of 2018 to date. NXT Brooklyn, I think, was better, but strictly WWE, I thought this was better than SummerSlam. The reason I say that is the collective matches that were not only crowd-pleasing, but either good to very good to great. There was a handful of them. One of the things that WWE did not do with this pay-per-view that I thought really helped out a lot was they gave the wrestlers time. They let them tell stories. They all had time to tell the story, where, you just mentioned it in some of the matches at SummerSlam, some of the matches felt a little rushed. Like, to me, Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns was too short of a match for a main event.
But that was more because they wanted to end the show on a high note and
I get
cut
why
it
they
quick,
did it.
and they wanted to prevent the booze and the hijacking and the all that stuff.
Right.
And even so, the way it was executed, I still like that. It was still only 6 minutes and 10 seconds. Fine. Crap on it all you want, but it served its purpose. Ronda Rousey versus Alexa Bliss. It was a 4-minute squash. Still served its purpose and did well. I actually liked the Ronda versus Nikki match a lot better than I thought I did.
Yeah.
And I also liked the 6-woman tag a lot better than I thought I did. But when you look at all the matches that SummerSlam offered, there weren't really any dud matches. Like, oh my God, this is such a crappy match. There were squashes and people didn't like that. That's one thing. But the matches that actually were given time, the Seth versus Ziggler was 22 minutes. Samoa Joe versus AJ was 22 minutes. Daniel Bryan versus The Miz was the longest match of the night at 23 minutes. There wasn't really anything that was like boring.
Yeah, so it was good. SummerSlam was good to a certain extent, depending on who you ask. But there were no really great moments. To me, Becky Lynch and Charlotte was great. That was the best match, I think, of 2018 as far as, wrestling is considered. Again, not just women's wrestling. It's just wrestling standards in general. So do you think that that's the best match of 2018 to this point?
Becky versus Charlotte?
Yes.
Probably. It's definitely in the top 5. I don't know if I would call it the best yet. It was by far the best women's match I've ever seen.
And back to what I was saying originally. So that was a great match. And then you had a lot of really good to good matches to follow that. Or to complement it. So you had Shayna Baszler versus Kairi Sane, which I thought was very good. Storm versus Shirai, which I thought was very good. Ronda and Nikki was a lot better than I thought it was going to be.
I could agree with that.
It was crowd pleasing. The crowd was into it, and it delivered to a certain extent. The Battle Royal, there were some spots that weren't very good. But ultimately, I thought the ending was done well. You got a cool moment with Asuka and Ember Moon.
Yes.
So that's why I think Evolution was just a step ahead of anything else that WWE has presented to date, because the collective matches, this was a big moment in wrestling history, right? The first time ever you were going to have women, a truly entire pay-per-view that's just dedicated to women's wrestling.
Right.
And to me, they all blew it out of the water. They all showed up and they delivered. And to me, collectively, all the matches put together were better than any other full pay-per-view that WWE has presented to date.
So why don't we do this? Let's take the top 5 matches of SummerSlam and compare it to the 5 that you just mentioned of Evolution. So that would be Seth and Dolph Ziggler for the Intercontinental Championship. I would say Charlotte, Becky, and Carmella for the Women's Championship. AJ versus Joe. Daniel Bryan versus The Miz. And I guess Brock and Lesnar was the 5th best. And yes, it was a 6-minute match, but I really enjoyed the high action, high urgency, and the story that was told in the limited amount of time that it had. I enjoyed that. Daniel Bryan and The Miz was still a 4 to 5 star match. Maybe it didn't fully deliver like people intended, but I still thought
that was
it was
tough because the crowd wasn't into it
the
for
crowd,
whatever reason.
Right. Well, it was right after Samoa Joe and AJ Styles, which they had a huge reaction for when Samoa Joe had the promo and AJ finally snapped.
That match was about to be great, and the ending, unfortunately, just wasn't
right. But then Charlotte and Becky, we got the heel turn that we have expected from Becky Lynch, and that could be the moment where if Becky Lynch doesn't do that, this pay-per-view might not have us talking about this right now, because you're not seeing Becky versus Charlotte in the last woman standing match and not seeing Becky Lynch as red hot as she is right now on SmackDown.
What was the best match of SummerSlam, in your opinion?
I would probably say AJ versus Samoa Joe.
And you would say would you say Becky and Charlotte was better only because it had a definitive ending, or do you think?
No. I think it was definitely the better match.
Those two are even. What do you think the second best was? The women's?
I would say Daniel Bryan versus The Miz. Was number 2.
And do you think Baszler, Insane, or Storm and Shirai were better than that, or even?
At least even. I don't know if I would definitely say better, but it was at least even. I would actually, you know what? I would say it was slightly better than those two. Storm and Shirai was a good match, and it was a good 15 minutes. But I honestly did not like the suplex spot on the apron. I'm not a fan of apron spots.
I thought that was great.
I was not a fan of I'm not a fan of apron spots. And kudos to Renee Young, by the way, who said, that's the hardest part of the ring. Why is she doing that? Thank you for finally acknowledging that on TV. But the next match after that, I would say, was the triple threat match for the SmackDown Women's Championship. So that was Charlotte versus Becky versus Carmella. I thought that was, like I say, Carmella's best match since she's been on the the SmackDown roster. And I think that one was slightly better than the 6 women tag of Sasha, Natalya, Bayley versus the Riot Squad.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, the point I'm trying to make is this: 10 years from now, I don't think people are going to look back at that SummerSlam and say, wow, you know what? That was great. There wasn't that big moment or that one match that really left you being like, wow, you know, I'm going to remember this for 10 years from now. I do think 10 years from now, people will still talk about Becky versus Charlotte.
I agree.
Not only because it was, you know, the first women's pay-per-view and it was a great match, but because it would have been a great match, whether it was WrestleMania, Royal Rumble, or Evolution. Mm-hmm. So I think having that historic match, wherever it would have been, whether it's Evolution or WrestleMania, and the rest of the matches collectively put Evolution slightly ahead of anything else WWE has presented so far. That's my opinion.
Right. Well, I mean, both do have their strong cases of being the best WWE pay-per-view of 2018. Let us know what you think by tweeting us, posting us on Facebook, going to Instagram. We're at SCPB Podcast. You could subscribe on YouTube. Smash that subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. And if you're listening to us on your favorite podcast provider, make sure you subscribe and review, because that's how we get noticed here in the world of podcasting. And without you, we're just doing this to nobody.
Give us some love, fuckers.
Really? Did you really? Is that that's what he thinks of Crown Jewel, everybody. All right.
That's the sound of Undertaker crapping himself midway through.
Trying to catch Shawn Michaels in the moonsault.
Oh, I thought Shawn broke his neck.
That was bad. But we will talk to you all next Sunday when we have our new episode starting at noon Eastern on your favorite podcast provider. For Ralph Valenti, our PA, Ava Valenti this week, my name is Michael Valenti. Thanks for listening to the Squared Circle Psychobabble.